All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you guys have had a great day or days thus far. And Debbie, are we ready to just jump right in?
Yep, yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so we're going to play, not going to play any other videos today, but we do want to do a quick little video intro. It's actually one we can live without. So the bottom line is, and you guys have seen these kind of videos before. This one is about, 2028. The reality is the stuff in the video is already happening. So it's everything from, artificial intelligence to all the impact technology is having on the world, the changing economy, a more globalized world, you name it. And it presents a lot of challenges and problems, including that 1/3 of the population is going to live to 100. The top two health conditions are obesity and depression. And the reality is the world is full of problems, and we're well aware of that. The thing is, our students need to be exposed to addressing those issues and those problems. And that's actually where jobs and careers come from too. So as depressing as some of the challenges we have are, now it looks like you probably can play it, but I think in the interest of time, it's okay. I don't know if we really need it, to be honest with you. The reality is
you have time.
You have time?
You have
Okay,
time.
we'll go ahead and play it then.
Okay, let me make sure let me reshare it with the sound. Sorry.
All right. Okay. Next slide. Let's get back in the slides here. That video could spark all kinds of discussions. And to be honest, we just don't have that kind of time. But the reality is, the world is full of challenges, and it seems like they're accelerating to some degree. And some of that might be our perception, but some of that also might be the technology is continuing to accelerate those things. And again, whether you're a parent, a student, an educator, a concerned citizen, the reality is we should all be aware of these things and what could the impact be on our students and learning and school, and how does that connect to their future and their careers. And so it connects to problem and project-based learning because we want students to address these issues. They are aware of them to some degree. They wrestle with them sometimes, and it affects their mental health. And the reality is we should turn all of these things over to kids in terms of them having an opportunity to address these things. We may not solve these issues, but everyone needs an opportunity to be engaged in these issues. And I believe this is where their careers and jobs are going to come from, is addressing all of the global challenges we have. So again, my name is Michael. Go ahead and next slide. You heard the background, just a veteran person who's always kind of believed that students should be working in authentic environments and, addressing real world problems using real world tools. And in 30 years of my career, I would have thought by now things would have actually changed a lot more than they have. I was pretty excited 30 years ago when we were having some of these discussions, but, globally, we still haven't gotten very far, to be honest with you. But I'm excited about organizations like World Over and so on who are trying to make these things happen for kids. So next slide. Okay, quick disclaimer, next slide. This is more of a philosophy, and I wish every educator would embrace this in terms of the opportunities they give their students. And Mike Smith was a longtime educator and speaker. If it's not illegal or immoral, why not give it a try? And a lot of times we are operating from fear in education, afraid to try things, afraid that it's not going to work, afraid that somebody's not going to approve, afraid that it has been done before. And the reality is, if we're really talking about authentic learning and real world learning, we need to put the fear aside. If we're not hurting somebody or we're not breaking the law or, a school policy or something like that, I don't want anyone to get in trouble or get hurt. But other than that, we should not be afraid. And unfortunately, in education, traditionally, we have operated from a lot of fear of a test score, fear of a standard, fear of a textbook publisher, fear of a bad administrator. I don't know. It goes on, right? And so next slide. That's just a quick little philosophy. I already dropped the link of the slides in there, so anyone you have access to these slides, because there'll be some resources and some videos that we won't watch and so on. So next slide. Okay, so I use the terms project-based learning, problem-based learning. You may hear other terms out there, and to me, they are all variations of the same thing. So problem and project-based learning are inquiry-based. So you sometimes will hear inquiry-based learning. Challenge-based learning to me is the same thing. The idea that we are presenting our students real-world challenging and giving an opportunity to wrestle with those and address those. Strength-based learning, the reality is this problem and project-based learning does allow students to use their strengths. It allows them to grow skills in areas that they're also weak in, but it does allow individual talents, individual passions, individual strengths to come to light, and that's empowering for students and also makes the work usually more high quality. Competency-based learning is this idea that we're teaching skills and that we're working towards mastering some of those skills. Students have a lot of chance to practice, get feedback, and get better. Place-based learning might be the only one that's a little bit different, and the idea there is that sometimes the environment matters, and that I look at that as there might be a project or a challenge that we really need to go out in the field, or we need to go to where this is to really see what it looks like. And so we don't always have an opportunity to do that. The good news, technology can really sometimes take us to some really powerful places, but sometimes the place does matter. So next slide. Okay, so why PBL? Next slide. The good news is for a lot of years in project-based learning, we didn't really have a lot of research. Well, we do now, and the research is quite refreshing. And those of us that have been advocates of project-based learning for a long time had great anecdotal information. We've seen it in action. We've seen students grow. We've seen classes in schools become better. But now the research is in, and the reality is almost anything you would measure success by in education, traditionally or not traditionally, we see that students who engage in deeper learning, inquiry-based learning, project-based learning are having success across the board. So they're more engaged, they do better in college, they're getting into college, they do better in career, they become lifelong learners, they take ownership of their learning, they're more connected to their community, they know more about who they are and what they're good at and what they want to do, they have deeper, richer resumes and portfolios. And so really whatever metric we look at, project-based learning or anything that's a variation of that or derivation of that, we're now seeing the success. We can actually demonstrate and prove it with research. So next slide. Okay, these are a couple quick ones, but in case people aren't aware, there has been a historical trend in schools. So I'm a high school educator by trade. And so, but I've worked with, actually K-14 teachers and leaders and so on. But the reality is that students traditionally progress through school, they get less and less engaged. And that should be a sign that there's something wrong with the system. And it usually does happen a lot around 4th or 5th grade traditionally. But these are just some quick stats that by the time kids get to high school, they've become less engaged, less curious, less involved. And again, not everyone, but statistically that's the trend. And that should be alarming to us, right? Because if someone's not engaged, next slide is kind of more the same thing, right? Again, as they advance through, people become less engaged and less connected to school, and that should again be an indication there's something wrong. We're not serving those folks well. Next slide. And so the idea is we need to engage people differently, and that can be done lots of different ways. And certainly educators and parents and so on have tried to do that in a variety of ways. But the reality is, if we can get people connected to their learning, connected to the world, connected to the why, they are going to be more engaged, and therefore they're going to have more success. Okay, next. Okay, so you've may or may not seen things like this. The reality is we're looking for students to be, more active in their learning, right? Traditional learning is a little bit more like what we're doing right now, where someone's talking and presenting, and someone may be taking notes, someone may be, daydreaming, someone may be inspired, a whole host of things. The reality is the more you move down that spectrum, we're trying to have students become, I like to describe it as we're trying to make every student into a teacher. Because educators are learning at the highest level because they are constantly reflecting, constantly revisiting, constantly trying new. And so we're trying to give every student that experience where they become the expert, they become the teacher, they become the presenter, and therefore they are learning at the highest level. So if we can have every learner, every student teaching one another, ultimately they would be learning at the highest level. Okay, next slide. Okay, so you're going to hear things about skills. A lot of school districts around the country and even around the world have things called graduate profiles or portrait of a graduate. They're focusing on skills. You're going to see different skills, or they're going to be labeled or called out differently. The good news is it used to be we focused on content or knowledge or information, and the world is really telling us that that's not the challenge. The challenge is what do you do with that information? What kind of skills do you have? What can you bring to the table? What can you bring to a problem or a situation? That's what employers want. That's what communities need. That's what, so next slide. So you may or may have not seen things like this, but this is a demonstration from Fortune 500 that the world has changed. So if you look back 55 years ago, right, it was all, the top things were kind of the, traditional things, right? Arithmetic and reading and writing. And those things are still on the list. And it's not to say that those types of literacy aren't important, but the reality is, if you talk to employers and people that work in the job market and hire people and so on, they're going to say the number one skill is teamwork or collaboration. And so I always tell people that if students are not working together, we're really doing a disservice to them. And by the way, working together can be with their peers or with a community partner, certainly with an educator, certainly with their parent, but they need to be collaborating with someone, and the more people, the better, right? And that's where and then you see the problem solving skills and those interpersonal and those communication skills. So this is what we're trying to get to in more of a deeper learning approach. And we still do reading and writing and math, of course. So next slide. I'm trying to move on. So you're going to hear things about portfolios. Is the world moving more towards a portfolio? And I always feel bad for high school students who maybe don't have opportunities like they should, and they graduate from high school and their portfolio is some test scores, an essay they wrote, some books they read. That's not a very rich portfolio, right? Where are the presentations they did? Where are the community partners they work with? Where are the problems they solved? Where are the videos they made? Where's the podcast? Where's the blog? And so the universities are moving this way. The world is already there. Next slide. You're going to, so really think about what LinkedIn is, right? LinkedIn is really kind of like everybody's public resume and portfolio, right? And that's next slide.
And Mike, don't worry, you have until 6:30. So yeah, drink water. I was like, it's okay.
Okay, we have till, so we had 40 minutes originally, or we?
Yes.
Okay.
So you have until 6:30. You're totally fine. Because okay. I know for me, as you're going along, I have questions. So that's in the chat, so we can make sure that Mike gets the opportunity to answer them later.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that for sure. And some of this is, I want to make sure we get to some of the meatier stuff too. This is kind of still a why here. So next slide. Okay, you may have heard the gig economy. Next slide is trying to explain that a little bit. The reality is that work is changing, right? And I think a lot of you may know parents out there who have more than one job. A lot of us have a side hustle. A lot of different reasons for that. But our students are going to be, and our learners today regardless of their age, they're going to be entering an economy that's way different than what many of us grew up in, right? And they're going to have a lot of times their job or the career is going to be a combination of several jobs, or they're going to be constantly getting, new contracts, having to go out and essentially sell their skills and themselves, regardless of the example I've used is there are now attorneys who, they don't have their own practice, and they work for a firm, but it's not a traditional law firm. They go to an office every day and they have to go out and kind of pitch themselves to clients to get a contract. And so what the reality is, what are the skills that our learners are going to need to kind of constantly be adapting, changing, and adding and proving their worth and getting a new contract or a new gig or a new job. So again, the skills are required there. Next slide. I use this term a lot. The reality is personal brand equity. It kind of comes from the business world, but for our students and our learners is they need to know who they are and what they can do. What's their worth? What can they offer people? What are they good at? And again, deeper learning gives them an opportunity to develop that portfolio and develop that ownership and that agency. And when they get into a situation, they can articulate what they can do. They know what they can do. They know what they have to offer. They know their strengths. And that's a powerful thing. And if they don't have that, again, it puts them at a disadvantage. So next. Then we really like the idea, we use this term a lot, but the reality is traditional school does not produce lifelong learners. Matter of fact, it quite often, unfortunately, produces people who associate school and learning as a negative experience, right? And so we're trying to create experiences where every learner, regardless of interest, regardless of skill, regardless of background, regardless of future career plans, can have an experience where they know that learning can be exciting, and to stay curious and to always be adding new skills and advancing their skills. That's the kind of mindset we're trying to create. And traditional school quite often doesn't do that. But if we switch to something that looks more like a deeper learning experience, like project-based learning, problem-based learning, we hopefully create that. So next slide. And then I think finally, the idea is that, next slide, is can we enjoy learning? And again, far too many people are not enjoying their school experience. Thank everyone for things like World Over that are trying to have, learners have an experience, because again, if they're not engaged and they're not enjoying the learning, it's not going to go very far. They may be compliant, they may do what you ask them to do, but they're not going to be doing higher level thinking. They're not going to be doing, they're not deepening that portfolio. They're not doing critical thinking. So again, it should be enjoyable. It should be fun. It doesn't mean it's not hard work, and it doesn't mean we're not going to have problems along the way or challenges, but in the end, we should be celebrating something really that was powerful, and that potentially transformational. Next slide. Okay, so we all have done projects in our schooling, and most of us do projects in our professional life every day, but we wouldn't distinguish between a project and project-based learning. So, because a lot of us will say just doing an activity is a project, or producing a product is a project, and that's true, but it may not be project-based learning. The idea is that what really makes it different is that we're addressing a real-world issue. Yeah, there's a public product. There are skills that are being developed and assessed. They're open-ended questions. It's inquiry-based. We're really trying to get to that solving or addressing an issue or problem versus just making something or just creating something. Sometimes we can have a fun activity, and that has value, right? So, for example, let's say I'm into macrame and I produce a piece of work. That's a project, but that's not necessarily project-based learning, unless I was maybe addressing a problem with that, like I'm trying to, clothe a village or something. Then I can turn that into project-based learning. So next slide. Okay, so there's lots of different ways to describe this, but this is one model that can be helpful. Is this idea that what does this look like? And it really starts with that challenging problem or question. It's inquiry-based. When you hear the word authenticity, this idea that it's real, right? We're addressing real world issues. We're using real tools, real resources, working with real people. Student voice and choice is something you may hear. And the idea is that can we offer students different ways to address the issue? Can we offer different ways for them to demonstrate their learning? Can we offer different ways of maybe choices of whom they get to work with? As an educator, it doesn't mean free for all. It doesn't mean full choice all the time. It means when we have opportunities, we try to give students choice, because choice is powerful. Choice is psychologically empowering. None of us like to work in an environment where we are told exactly what to do and how to do it all day long. At the same time, also, most of us do not thrive well in chaos where someone says, do whatever you like. The reality is there's a happy medium here, and student voice and choice is something we work with to do that. Reflection is that metacognition, that we're thinking about what we're doing. We're thinking about learning, right? So that we're thinking about the process, and that's where that higher level thinking comes from. Critique and revision, this idea that we do a lot of formative opportunities. So we don't just do a one and done thing. We try to get students to have the highest quality work by continually getting feedback from people and then improving their work. Ultimately, there is some sort of a final presentation or final product, but typically the idea is that we've had some practice rounds before that from either experts, educators, peers, to make that work better. And then that we do share our work publicly. So next slide. So types of projects, sometimes you can design, plan, and produce something, and you can kind of roll through these slides pretty quickly every couple of seconds here. We'll lose time too fast. So just maybe every 3 seconds here, these next few slides. So it can be a problem solving, most of it like sustainability. You're going to see examining a controversial issue. These all are connected to some degree. Examination of a philosophical, moral, ethical issue. So projects can look differently. Sometimes it can be investigation of an event or historical time or a phenomenon. Next. And again, projects can make a difference a lot of ways. If you look at those first few, the ones I'd really like to say, I think we're often trying to educate others, whether that be, at least our peers publicly, but even our community. We're definitely trying to address some sort of a real world issue. We may be asking people to do something, to get involved, right? Or to maybe have a mindset shift. We may be building something that other people can use, a website, et cetera. It could be planning an event, raising money out, but those first 4 are really the kind of things I think we're heading towards. Next slide. And that we are asking learners to produce real world products. Okay, so again, it's that podcast, it's that website, it's that video, it's that presentation, it's that blog, things that we see in the real world and that have longevity, that have impact, and that my way of looking at this is we want to have students produce things that other people do in the real world. It's not something we just do in school, right? And the problem is a lot of school is we do these things that only exist in school and they don't exist in the real world. So we need to make, we make that consistent. Next slide. And then we ask questions, does the project focus on things like skills and standards? Does it address an issue? Is there an opportunity for students to go deeper with it? Is it authentic? Is that voice and choice? Those things that we mentioned, the kind of the pedagogy. So next slide. If someone wanted to read more, that link, again, if you have the link to all the slides that are being presented here, that link will go into those elements a little deeper, but we don't have that kind of time today. So I did a little quick overview. Next slide. Okay, so driving questions. I haven't heard our previous session with Erica. That came up to the idea that we put our challenge or our problem in the form of a question. And next slide. So the reality is that they're open-ended questions. Again, this forces that inquiry. It forces that any issue or problem that's out there that we want to address, obviously there's more than one way to address the issue or problem, right? And so we're trying to set the stage for that. And it really, that last sentence says it well. The driving question should provide clarity around the project's purpose, audience, and product if possible. Like it's kind of the mission. What are we asking learners or students to do? What is the challenge? And this kind of frames it and gives us sort of that mission or that goal. Next. So, there's some examples you can see there. You'll see a lot of driving questions will often use the word how, just because, again, we're looking for that open-ended, and how implies that there's multiple ways to do, and we're going to be doing something. So it's not just a why or what, it's how. Something's going to be done, and it can be done in a variety of ways. Next. I think there's some examples coming up too, but for students, it kind of guides the work. What are we doing today? I always said if someone walked into the middle of a project, let's say a parent, or let's say a visitor to a school or a classroom or a learning environment, and said, hey, what are you guys working on? If a student or learner said the driving question, that would be a pretty good way to say, this is what we're going after. This is what we're trying to do, right? It kind of is like it summarizes what our goal is to some degree. And for teachers, sometimes we have to go back to it. Next slide. I think we have some examples here. So just again, I really prefer the ones that start with how, and then you can get as specific or broad as you like. The reality is we're trying to make them student friendly, not overly academic, because this is just a question. The problem or issue is going to be deep and complex, but we don't need to make the question complex, right? The question is that way to summarize that mission for us. So anyway, next slide. Okay, this is a fun story I just want to share because several years ago, this was during the pandemic, actually, a 5th grade teacher, and this might be helpful to a parent or an educator that's trying to get started with project-based learning. Is how would you get started? We have interests, right? So there was a teacher that came to me and said, I would like to do a project about sharks. And I said, well, why do you want to do a project about sharks? And she said, well, I have a lot of boys in my 5th grade class and they're very interested in sharks. And I said, okay, that's a good place to start, at least, because you're trying to address student interest, which is you're being student oriented and student focused. That's fantastic. I said, but we have to go, but why would we do a project about sharks? So she and I together just got on, just started Googling sharks. And within 5 minutes, we found out that sharks are like all creatures, but maybe just incredibly unique. And they have this huge role in the oceans, and they have a huge impact on the environment. And when I saw things like sharks keep carbon out of the atmosphere, sharks boost the economy, I said to her, I said, oh my gosh, you have something here, right? Yes, your original motivation was because your students have interest, but the reason why we're going to do this is because sharks are incredibly unique and powerful. We could learn a lot from them. So then we turn that into a question: is how can the study of sharks save the oceans and our planet? And the truth is they are being studied, and they're vital, and they're having huge impact in a variety of ways. And we really can learn a lot from them to address different issues, right? Whether that's, how to save the oceans, the planet, medicine, food, on and on and on. In this case, we tried to make it focus, how can we study of them help us actually save the oceans and the planets, because they have some innate things that are doing this already. If you can keep carbon out of the atmosphere as a creature, you've got some unique skills and talents. So next slide. Okay, so where do we find our projects? They're all over, right? And you can find lists like this out there. Where do we find I really say, where do we find our issues and problems? Well, here we go. Next slide. I know the news can be depressing. It is depressing, by the way. And I'm a former journalist too. But yeah, so the news is a great source, right? The news, unfortunately, is full of problems and issues. You can go to community partners or industry partners, our businesses and people in our community. They're already wrestling with these issues. They're wrestling with sustainability. They're wrestling with the environment. They're wrestling with the economy. They're wrestling with how to educate somebody, that kind of thing. So they're all over the place. We don't have to start from scratch. Maybe we join someone else's problem or issue. Next slide. And this is why I like working with the nonprofit organizations a lot, because that's what nonprofit organizations do, is they try to not only improve the community, but they're trying to address particular issues. And so we don't have to start from scratch. Maybe we partner with one of our local nonprofits and say, hey, can our students or our learners help you with address one of the things that you guys are working on and contribute to your work? And that's really valid on a whole bunch of levels, because we're not starting from scratch. It's obviously real professionals are doing it, and they have a lot of expertise, and our students are now working with people at a high level, right? So next slide. Okay, there's also a lot of educational resources out there, and there's more than these, but and I'll share a couple of these in a minute too. But for educators, there's lots of stuff in AI now that can do a lot of this with us too. And so we don't have time today, but next slide. Okay. The other thing is, again, it's all around us, right? So if you watch the news or you read for 5 minutes, you should be presented with stuff that would be legitimate things for our students to be considering and wrestling with. Next. Okay. I don't want to click on this, but if you haven't heard of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, this started in 2015, a great resource where it puts all of the issues and problems in the world sort of in categories. And they do relate. But the thing here is they've gathered data, and to me, the United Nations has huge credibility. So for students and learners, I want them working with valid data. I want them working with legitimate organizations that do this, and teachers are now have been joining this movement, and there's lots of resources. It's just a great resource about kind of putting the issues or problems in categories and providing data and research and resources around those. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to go real fast on some projects here in a second too. I just love this term. This was a teacher years ago. I'd love to see all of our learners become global problem solvers. So next slide. Okay, here's a couple quick projects. So we're not going to play these videos. I'm just going to say they're there. You have the link to these slides, so you have these videos if you want to watch them later. Next, the first one is called the Finance Project. These are math students in high school, and they actually took an idea and flipped it. The original idea was, a lot of us have done these budget projects where we figure out what our budget's going to be to have a house and a car and this and that. Well, what this teacher did was actually work with real people. The students put together financial plans for actual adults in the community and dealt with their retirement and their mortgage and helping their students plan for college. So just a great little flip on a traditional project, but they're having the students basically work for a client, a real person in the community, and help them with a real problem. Next slide. This is a pretty famous one too. No, we don't want to play the video. It's called the Tiny House Project. This is a 3rd or 4th grade teacher in San Jose. But what the students did is they didn't actually build a house, but what they did do is they designed an actual tiny house, and they did do the blueprints or the designs. And they worked with an architect. They worked with people in the community, and they did lots of collaboration, and they integrated all their subject areas into this project, and the students were super engaged. Great one to watch for an elementary project. Next slide. Okay, this is a great one that they did in middle school about broken laws. If you don't know that term, is we have laws that are either outdated or just don't serve the purpose anymore. And the driving question was, how can we change laws to make society better for everyone? So we do need to rewrite laws sometimes or revamp laws. And they did a podcast about this. Next one. What was great is some of these were during the pandemic too, is like, this was a great elementary one about, and I believe that all of our students and learners should have exposure to entrepreneurism. Again, going back to that gig economy, it's going to be such a big part of their future careers, is give students an opportunity to create businesses, and you can make those as authentic and go as far as those as you want, like student-run enterprises, student-led enterprises, and you can do this all the way in the younger grades. So the previous one was a women's history one. And so this idea we take things that are already going on and we piggyback off those, and how can we turn those into questions and apply them to other things. Okay, next one. You'll see a lot of things out there that are like senior projects, and they're called different things like passion projects. But the idea, especially by the time a learner or student is a junior or senior in high school, they ideally should be given an opportunity to pursue a project of just their own interest, and to apply all these things they've been learning, and hopefully partner with people again, but where they can just pursue a personal passion of theirs and go really deep with it. And then the expectation is from us, parents and educators, is, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to produce with that? So next slide. How are we doing on time here?
I think you're good. You're going to go till 6. You've got about another 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Then we're good. We'll have plenty of time for questions. Okay. So again, these are just quick all of this is meant to be an overview, everybody. So, project and problem-based learning, like everything else, it's a lot of information out there, lots of models, lots of resources. I'm trying to share some of the ones I think might be helpful. This is a great PBL Works, used to be called the Buck Institute. They're kind of one of the leaders in problem and project-based learning. What's nice for an educator or a parent is you can create an account here. It's all free, and you can have access to their resources, which are sample projects, rubrics, forms that students can use, and teachers and educators and parents can use. And so I would encourage people, if you have any interest in this at all, is to go to PBL Works and create an account. You will not get bombarded by emails from them, and you never have to buy anything. But you just have access to all these great resources and some really good projects that you can replicate or adapt or adopt. So next one. A lot of us have, at least a lot of educators, especially on the West Coast, have heard of High Tech High. They're one of the many early adopters of problem and project-based learning there in San Diego. The reason I share it is because they share and publish a lot of their projects online. So again, they have hundreds of projects, and whether you're a parent or an educator or a student, a concerned citizen, community member, and you want to see what this can look like, some great examples. And again, I would encourage people not to always create projects from the ground up, is to find a project that someone else did and either adapt or adopt it. You may be able to replicate it because it's totally authentic and legitimate to do that. Or you may go, I really love this idea, but I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm going to customize it for the situation a little bit. And both of those are legitimate. So just a great resource of projects out there. Next one. Okay, so I don't know how many of you guys have heard of Edutopia, but they've been around a long time too, the George Lucas Foundation, and they're the ones that have produced a lot of the research that support problem and project-based learning. And again, they have a rich a library of projects and also just articles and research about problem and project-based learning. So I'm kind of sharing some of the, I just think some of the great resources out there, and we would have to get into the AI tools at another time, but next one. Again, this is that research I referred to in the early part. So if you want to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper, and again, this is valuable because we did not have this for years, and now we have that as well, in addition to all the things we already knew. So, okay, this is a downloadable PDF. Again, if you have a link to the slides, you have all these links, right? So all these are live links. This came out a few years ago. Again, this came out of the Buck Institute and PBL Works, but this is a great resource for parents or teachers or anyone that has any interest in this at all. A nice little overview of what this looks like, and again, why would we do this? Okay, why is the world asking us to do things like this, or needs us to ask students to do things like this? Next. Okay, this is another one. This is it says for teachers, and again for for parents, especially parents that that are working with students at home. There's another great great little overview. It's got some research in it, but again, it takes a lot of information from practitioners and kind of puts it in a very user friendly form. So so it's a little ebook again, but a great resource to kind of, especially for someone who just wants to jump in and start learning about this a little bit more. So I just want to include some of these different resources and make them available to you. So those are all linked in the slides there. Next one. Okay, so I think we're towards the end here, and I know originally about the time we had, but it looks like we have a few more minutes and stuff too. So happy to answer any questions. It is in this time, it is difficult to do a lot without, we could, but I want to encourage you to go back and maybe watch any of those videos if you want to see, if you haven't seen any of those before, about what those projects look like, or go to any of those project resources, like I mentioned, PBL Works or High Tech High, and see some of the great projects that people are doing out there. And there's lots of examples if you search, certainly, but what questions came up, if any?
So just FYI, for any of you in the audience who feel like they have missed on any of this chock full of information or any of these awesome links, feel free. I did actually drop his slide link in the chat. So feel free to do that. And also, I don't know if, please do reach out to Michael. This is his information. Good time to take a screenshot, audience. So go ahead and do that. And then Michael, there is one question. A couple of people asked about the video. Is that will that be in the website that I copied and pasted in the chat?
Yeah, so the link you pasted are the slides that we just went through.
Okay. There's that specific video. Everybody loved that video, by the way.
Which one? The first one, that did you know?
The very first one, like 2028. Like,
yeah. And I've been using that for a lot of years now, I'll be honest with you. And I keep going back to it just because, and there's a lot of, Did You Know was a series for years. So if you even Google Did You Know videos, there's a whole bunch of them. But this one I thought really did a good job of laying out, so the challenges we're facing globally, right? And how that impacts everything. So I'm glad to me, it's a great reason why we want to do these things, right? And I also know that video can be can create anxiety. It can be overwhelming because it can be daunting, and I think we're all a little bit overwhelmed at times about what we see in the world, right? And our students especially are really overwhelmed by a lot of those things, and there's a lot of anxiety that comes from those, right? And they are worried and concerned about all these things. My only advice to them, or to parents, or to educators, is, well, let's go ahead and try to tackle some of these. We that's about the best we can do, right? Let's try to make it better. Let's try to improve it. And again, that's where careers and jobs are born. And to me, I'm always interested in that as well.
Yeah, because you actually talked about, I was so interested when you talked about disengagement, because it's already surfacing in our global workforce. 70% of our global workforce is unengaged, right? And being actively disengaged is like 16%. So I'm like, it starts right where you're saying, in education.
Yeah, and that's pretty frightening, really, right? If you're seeing that in the workplace, what is that? What's the impact of that, right? Is how do we? And so that's a problem for all of us. And again, I think that's whether we're talking about school or work, we should all be concerned about this, because it all has an impact on all of us, directly or indirectly. I have adult children, and just watching them navigate their careers and all the things that they're facing that I didn't have to face, and a lot of us can relate to that as well. But yeah, we're and I know people say this a lot, but we are in really some new waters, right? And education is sort of trying to keep up, right? But we really have to try harder, and we got to be honest with ourselves, right? Kind of what and where we're at. So,
yeah. And thanks so much for sharing. You're such a powerful advocate for project-based learning, because I could see this, just the results and the numbers that we're getting from project-based learning is encouraging. Finally, yes. To get something encouraging about education.
For sure. Another great reason to do it, right, is we need the inspiration, and this can be inspirational type stuff, and our students need that too. So,
yeah, and especially since a lot of our audience are homeschoolers, like how could they actually implement project-based learning? How could they bring that out of their kids to see where they can start with that?
Yeah, and I think traditionally a lot of homeschool parents, they are doing things like this, right? And I think the only thing that maybe I might offer them is maybe some of the resources or some of the pedagogy about, if we really want to go deep and do it well, what kind of things does it take, right? But I think what's nice about a lot of homeschool parents is they get this at a certain level already. They want their kids to have really high quality experiences. They want them to have authentic experiences. They know that traditional school has not done a good job of this, and so they, in many ways, they are more prepared to do this than others, and they are doing things like this already. So I've seen some in the homeschool environment, some of the most interesting projects, and especially that place-based learning, right? Taking learners or students to a place, going out to the river and dealing with, environmental issues, going to the ocean and dealing with that type of thing, right? Going where animals are and dealing with things that are affecting, all the endangered species. And I can go on and on and on, right? And
I just read something about kids just inventing a way to get rid of microplastics in water. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, and the thing is, kids are doing these things, and the other thing is, kids are doing a lot of these, sometimes these things on their own, and that also worries me. Is that they are not only are they not engaged in school, they're making up their own school, right? Because they realize that there's a world out there, right? And so again, and again, I don't want to be too overly critical, but education as a whole needs to do a much better job. So, but I applaud the homeschool community for sure, because I think they've actually gotten this for years, and are doing a lot of these things. And if I can just offer them, maybe some technical things or some more resources, that might be what they need. So.
Yeah, and I know that some of the people on our panel are chomping at the bit to actually ask you some questions as well. So I'm going to go ahead and open up. Feel free, anybody, to unmute yourself and talk. And those in the audience, do feel free to put your question in chat, and we'd be glad to answer that.
Yeah, and I have the chat open, and we'll answer it either way you feel comfortable.
Any of our panel as well, feel free to ask.
Michael, this is Manny. Just want to thank you for coming on to this platform and speaking. But there is a question with that. So yesterday we had the delight of having a speaker who recommended a book that I actually bought yesterday. And I want to read a piece to it and tell me what your thoughts on it, because you spoke a little bit about it. So this is what it says. The starting fact I discover is that by the end of first and second grade, many students actually see themselves as failures. It is estimated that 95% of kindergartners feel good about their learning potential. However, 98% of seniors in high school have lost their creative, inquisitive spirits. So can you speak to that, and just what's your...
And that's a fairly documented thing. I had a couple slides there from the Gallup organization. That's kind of what they were referring to. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think this is what school, again, not everyone and not across the board, but as a system, traditional school, and by the way, I don't, public school, private school, whatever, traditional school as we know it has produced this, right? And there's a lot of reasons for it. And I think it has to do with everything from textbook publishers to the schedule at school to the training at school. But there's no doubt, and I think parents have seen this, and all of us have seen this as a parent, if you're a parent, and as an educator, certainly have seen this, right? And I was a high school, teacher for years. And I said, I talked to my friends, and I could see elementary kids going to school, and they're smiling and they're happy, and you go into their classroom and they're participating and they're raising their hand, and you can walk into a lot of high school classrooms, and to this day, you're going to be begging to get them to participate. So school has done something to too many kids that is not positive, right? And we have to be honest about that. Is what's the structure of school? And Tony Wagner, a professor, said this years ago really well, is that the culture of school is not in line with the culture of learning. And so that's a pretty powerful indictment, right? Is that the system that we created, again, not maliciously, but it's a byproduct of a lot of things. And if you haven't seen the movie, it came out about 10 years ago, and I'm losing the name right now. But this idea that school has just, has done a lot of negative things to kids, right? And our system of school was, I hate to say it, was created by 12 white men, 130 years ago. And so does that mean that became the template that we live and die by, right? These are the high school requirements. This is how many classes you take. This is how many days you go to school. All these things are artificially created and manufactured, and are probably may have not been super relevant then, and I will probably say not very relevant now. So Manny, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and then also just thank you so much, Mike. By the way, you've been awesome. Gems, total gems, and thank you for the slides, because that's something to take home that people can revisit and just research on their own, right? It's like you just gave us a project-based learning homework assignment.
anyone who wants to accept the challenge, you're welcome to do it. So
I appreciate your time, Mike. You've been awesome.